A shark protects a swimmer from danger. How this happened will amaze you. The ocean stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, its waves dancing with a hypnotic rhythm that belied its mysterious depths. The salty tang of the sea air mixed with the distant cries of gulls, creating a symphony of nature. It was a perfect day on the remote coastline of Oregon, a paradise for anyone who sought solace from the noise of daily life. Amid the pristine beauty of the beach, a lone swimmer named Nina ventured far from the shore. She was an experienced diver, known for her fearless explorations of uncharted waters. Today was no different. She had come to these isolated shores to immerse herself in the untamed beauty of the Pacific Ocean, seeking the thrill of the unknown. The water was calm as she floated, her breath steady as she admired the coral reef beneath her. Vibrant schools of fish darted through the currents, their colors glinting in the sunlight streaming through the water. Nina smiled behind her snorkel mask, feeling an unspoken connection to the aquatic world. But the tranquility was short-lived. Far below, a shadow moved with terrifying precision. Its sleek, torpedo-like body sliced through the water silently, its fin glinting ominously. A great white shark, one of nature's most formidable predators, patrolled the depths. It wasn't hunting, not yet, but its instincts were sharp, and it had detected a disturbance in the water. Nina, oblivious to the danger, dove deeper, following a cluster of shimmering fish. Her curiosity carried her farther from the safety of the shallows. The deeper she went, the cooler the water became, and an eerie silence replaced the sounds of the surf above. Suddenly she felt it, a shift in the current, subtle but unmistakable. It was as if the water itself had grown wary. Nina paused, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned slowly, scanning the surrounding blue for any sign of movement, and then she saw it. The shark's dorsal fin emerged in the distance, cutting through the surface like a blade. It was massive, easily over 15 feet long. Nina's breath hitched as adrenaline surged through her veins. She knew the stories, the statistics. Shark attacks were rare, but not impossible. Panic threatened to take hold, but Nina fought to remain calm. She floated motionless, hoping the predator would lose interest and swim away. The minutes felt like hours as the great white circled her, its movements deliberate and menacing. From the shore, a lone figure watched through binoculars. It was Michael, a marine biologist who had been studying shark migration patterns along the coast. He saw Nina and the predator, his heart lurching in fear. Without hesitation, he grabbed his radio, alerting the Coast Guard. "Come on, stay calm," Michael muttered under his breath, his hands trembling. He knew enough about sharks to understand that any sudden movement could provoke an attack. In the water, Nina's limbs began to ache from staying still. The shark closed the distance between them, its dark eyes fixed on her. It was close enough now that she could see the scars along its body, signs of battles fought in the unforgiving ocean. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of charging at her, the shark veered sharply to the side. Nina followed its gaze and felt a chill run down her spine. A shadow even larger than the shark loomed in the depths, a massive jellyfish swarm, their stingers trailing like ghostly tendrils. The currents had carried the swarm dangerously close to her, their lethal embrace ready to trap anything in their path. The shark seemed to hesitate, as if assessing the situation. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, it surged toward the jellyfish, using its massive body to create a barrier between Nina and the swarm. Nina's eyes widened in disbelief. Was the shark protecting her? The creature circled back, nudging her gently with its snout as if urging her to move. Heart-pounding, Nina understood the silent command. She began swimming toward the shore, her strokes slow and deliberate. The shark stayed close, guarding her like a sentinel. By the time she reached the shallows, tears streamed down her face, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization of what had just occurred. She turned back to see the shark lingering at the edge of the reef. For a moment its dark eyes met hers, and then it vanished into the blue. Michael sprinted to her side, pulling her out of the water. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice shaking. I think it saved me," Nina stammered, her mind racing to comprehend the events. From that day on, Nina's encounter with the great white shark became a story of wonder and awe, a testament to the unpredictable bonds that could form between humans and nature's most misunderstood creatures. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of her connection with the ocean's silent guardian. The shore seemed deceptively close, but every stroke Nina took felt heavier. The adrenaline from her encounter with the shark had begun to fade, leaving her muscles fatigued. The salt stung her eyes and her breathing came in ragged gasps. She paused, treading water, as her thoughts swirled in chaos. The shark's behavior defied everything she thought she knew. Why hadn't it attacked? And why had it intervened to protect her from the jellyfish swarm? Questions filled her mind, but there was no time for answers. A loud rumble broke her thoughts, a sound both unnatural and terrifying. Nina turned her head toward the open ocean, and her blood ran cold. A massive wave surged on the horizon, far taller than any she had ever seen. It was a rogue wave, a monstrous anomaly born from underwater currents and powerful winds. The wave charged toward the coastline like a runaway freight train, swallowing everything in its path. Michael, still standing on the shore, saw the wave too. His radio crackled with warnings from the Coast Guard, but there was no time to evacuate. "Nina!" he shouted, waving his arms frantically. "You need to get out of the water now." She heard his voice faintly over the roar of the approaching wave. Panic set in as she realized the shore was too far. Even if she swam with every ounce of strength she had left, the wave would reach her before she could escape. Suddenly, the water beneath her churned violently. Nina screamed, thinking the shark had returned, but as the sleek grey body emerged beside her, she realized it was the same great white. It swam close, its movements urgent and deliberate. Without thinking, Nina grabbed onto its dorsal fin. The shark surged forward, cutting through the water with astonishing speed. Nina clung tightly, her heart pounding. She could feel the sheer power of the creature beneath her as it navigated the chaotic waves with ease. It wasn't just taking her away from the shore, it was steering her toward a small rocky outcrop to the north. The wave was almost upon them now. The air crackled with electricity as the wind howled, and the water roared like an angry beast. Nina's knuckles turned white as she held on, her mind a blur of fear and disbelief. The shark pushed harder, its body undulating with incredible strength. Just as the wave began to crest above them, it dove sharply, pulling Nina underwater. The force of the wave crashed above, but the shark's swift descent carried them into the safety of the depths. Nina squeezed her eyes shut, holding her breath as long as she could. The world was a swirl of bubbles and turbulence. The shark moved with precision, avoiding debris and strong currents. When they finally resurfaced, Nina gasped for air, coughing as the salty spray hit her face. The shark guided her to the outcrop, where jagged rocks jutted out of the water like the spine of a sleeping dragon. With the last of her strength, Nina scrambled onto the rocks, her chest heaving. The rogue wave slammed against the outcrop, sending sprays of water into the air. But Nina was safe for now. Michael, watching from the beach, felt a surge of relief. He had seen the shark's incredible rescue unfold through his binoculars, and it left him awestruck. Grabbing his gear, he sprinted toward the nearest boat, determined to reach Nina. On the rocks, Nina turned to look for the shark. It was circling nearby, its dorsal fin cutting through the water. For a moment, she thought it might leave now that she was out of danger, but instead it lingered, almost as if it was watching over her. She whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Her voice was barely audible over the crashing waves. The shark moved closer, its massive head rising partially out of the water. Nina stared into its dark eyes, and a strange calm washed over her. Despite its size and power, the creature didn't seem threatening. If anything, it felt protective. As she sat on the rock, shivering from the cold and exhaustion, another sound reached her ears. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, a deep guttural growl that sent shivers down her spine. Nina's eyes darted to the horizon, where the wave had receded. In its wake, something enormous moved. A pod of orcas, their black and white bodies sleek and menacing, was heading straight toward the outcrop. Orcas, also known as killer whales, were apex predators of the ocean. While they rarely posed a threat to humans, their hunting methods were ruthless, and now they seemed to have taken an interest in Nina and her unlikely guardian. The shark positioned itself between Nina and the approaching pod, its movements tense and deliberate. The orcas slowed as they neared, their dorsal fins slicing through the water like knives. Nina's breath hitched. She had studied marine life enough to know that sharks and orcas were natural enemies. Encounters between the two often ended in the shark's defeat. One of the orcas broke away from the pod, circling the shark with an almost taunting motion. The great white didn't back down, holding its ground in front of the outcrop. The confrontation was electrifying, like a battle between titans. Nina watched, helpless and terrified as the orcas closed in. Just when it seemed like the standoff would end in violence, a loud horn echoed across the water. Michael's boat appeared in the distance, speeding toward the outcrop. The orcas hesitated, their sleek bodies turning toward the sound. The shark took the opportunity to guide Nina back into the water. She hesitated, but the urgency in the shark's movements was clear. Trusting the creature once more, Nina slipped off the rock and grabbed its fin. Together, they swam toward the approaching boat. The orcas followed briefly, but eventually veered away, disappearing into the depths. Michael reached out, pulling Nina onto the boat. She collapsed on the deck, coughing and shivering but alive. As the boat sped back to shore, Nina looked back at the water. The shark was still there, trailing behind them like a silent guardian. When they reached the shallows, it lingered for a moment, before disappearing into the ocean's depths. Nina whispered, "Thank you," knowing the shark couldn't hear her, but feeling the weight of her gratitude nonetheless. Michael knelt beside her, his eyes wide with wonder. "Nina," he said, his voice trembling, "I've never seen anything like that. That shark, and it saved you." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I don't understand why, but it did." Michael placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Some things in nature are beyond explanation, but one thing's for sure, you just experienced something extraordinary." As the boat reached the shore, Nina looked out at the vast ocean, her heart full of awe and gratitude. She knew her life had been forever changed by the encounter. Little did she know, the shark's story wasn't over. This was just the beginning of an extraordinary connection that would defy all odds and captivate the world. The boat rocked gently in the shallow waters as Michael helped Nina onto the dock. Her legs trembled, and her breaths came in sharp, ragged gasps. The crowd on the beach, drawn by the commotion, erupted into murmurs and exclamations as they saw her. A young girl asked, "Did she really swim with a shark?" Her mother hushed her, though her own wide eyes betrayed her disbelief. Michael wrapped a blanket around Nina's shoulders and guided her to a bench by the shoreline. "Take it easy," he said softly. "You're safe now." But Nina wasn't entirely sure she was. The images of the shark, the wave, and the approaching orcas played in a loop in her mind. Her fingers unconsciously traced the outline of her necklace, a small silver pendant in the shape of a wave. It had been a gift from her late father, a marine biologist who had instilled in her a deep love and respect for the ocean. Even now, with her body exhausted and her mind reeling, she couldn't shake the profound sense of awe. That shark, it wasn't just any predator. It had acted with intention, with purpose. Michael, ever the skeptic, broke the silence. "Nina, you're lucky to be alive. That shark could have—" He stopped himself, realizing the absurdity of his next words. "But it didn't. It saved you. I've never seen anything like it." She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "It felt intelligent, like it understood I needed help." Michael frowned, his scientific mind wrestling with the idea. Sharks were apex predators, magnificent and ancient creatures, but intelligent in a way that suggested altruism. It was unheard of. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the water's edge. Nina turned, her heart skipping a beat. The shark was back. Its dorsal fin broke the surface, gliding through the shallows with an almost deliberate grace. The crowd recoiled in fear, stepping back from the shoreline. A few people grabbed their phones, snapping pictures or recording videos, while others shouted warnings. Nina stood, her legs still unsteady, but something compelled her forward. She ignored Michael's protests and walked to the water's edge. "Nina, what are you doing?" he called, panic lacing his voice. She didn't answer. Her focus was entirely on the creature before her. It had stopped just a few feet from the shore, its massive body partially visible beneath the clear water. The shark remained motionless, its dark, fathomless eyes locked on hers. Nina felt a strange connection, as though the shark was trying to communicate. She knelt, the cool water lapping at her feet. "I don't understand," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the gentle waves. "Why are you here?" The shark didn't move, but something about its presence felt deliberate. Nina thought back to the stories her father used to tell her about the ocean's mysteries. "There's more to the sea than we'll ever know," he had said, "and sometimes the creatures within it surprise us in ways we can't explain." The memory brought tears to her eyes. She reached out hesitantly, her fingers trembling as they touched the water's surface. The shark remained still, its immense power contained in a posture of unexpected calm. Michael approached cautiously, keeping a safe distance. "Nina, this is insane. Sharks don't just hang around like this. It's dangerous." She turned to him, her expression resolute. "This one isn't." As if to prove her point, the shark shifted slightly, a slow and deliberate movement that sent ripples through the water. It wasn't threatening. If anything, it seemed protective. Nina's thoughts raced. Was it possible that the shark had formed some kind of bond with her? The idea seemed ludicrous, but then again, everything about the day had defied logic. Michael's voice broke her reverie. "We need to call someone. The Marine Patrol, maybe a research team. This isn't normal." Nina shook her head. "No, not yet." "Nina, please, Michael, just give it a moment." Reluctantly, he stepped back, his phone still in hand. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Nina remained by the water's edge, her gaze never leaving the shark. Minutes passed, and the tension began to ease. The shark showed no signs of aggression, and the crowd's initial fear gave way to curiosity. A little boy, no older than 6, tugged at his father's hand. "Daddy, it's like a big fish. Can I go see?" His father shook his head firmly. "No, it's not safe." But Nina heard the boy's words, and they sparked a memory. Her father had once described sharks as misunderstood creatures, feared because of their power, but seldom appreciated for their role in the ocean's delicate balance. "They're not monsters," he had said. "They're guardians of the sea." The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Was that what this shark was? A guardian? As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the shark finally moved. It circled once, then began to retreat toward the open ocean. Nina felt a pang of sadness as she watched it go. She didn't know why, but she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and loss. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's leaving," she nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I know." The crowd began to disperse, their excitement fading into murmured conversations. But Nina remained by the water, watching the shark until its dorsal fin disappeared beneath the waves. She turned to Michael, her eyes shining with determination. "We need to find out more about it, where it came from, why it acted the way it did." He raised an eyebrow. "You think it's more than just an anomaly?" "I think it's a story worth telling," she said, her voice steady. Michael sighed, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You always did have a thing for the impossible." As they walked back toward the dock, Nina glanced over her shoulder one last time. The ocean stretched out before her, vast and mysterious, and somewhere beneath its surface a guardian swam, carrying with it the secrets of a day that had changed her life forever. The days following Nina's encounter with the shark were anything but ordinary. News of the incident had spread like wildfire. Headlines painted the event as a miracle. "Shark saves swimmer from predators." Videos recorded by bystanders went viral, showing the massive creature circling Nina protectively as orcas prowled the waters. For Nina, the experience felt surreal. Sitting by her bedroom window, she watched the ocean stretch endlessly before her. It looked calm now, but she knew how quickly its mood could shift. Her mind replayed the moment the shark had shielded her from danger, and she felt a strange pull, an almost magnetic urge to return to the water. Michael, ever the voice of caution, was less enthusiastic. "So you can't be serious," he said, pacing the small living room of their rented beach house. Nina held her wetsuit in one hand, determination etched across her face. "I need to know why it helped me, Michael. That wasn't just instinct. It was something else, something bigger." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're talking about a shark like it's Lassie. It doesn't make sense." "Exactly," she shot back. "It doesn't make sense. That's why I need to go back out there." Despite his protests, Michael reluctantly agreed to accompany her. As a marine biologist, his curiosity was piqued, even if his instincts screamed against it. The following morning, they ventured out in a small motorboat, the early sun casting a golden glow over the water. Nina felt her heart quicken as they reached the same spot where the shark had first appeared. The water was eerily still, its surface like glass. "I don't see anything," Michael muttered, scanning the horizon with binoculars. Nina closed her eyes, letting the gentle sway of the boat calm her nerves. She dipped her hand into the water, feeling its cool embrace. "It's here," she said softly. And then she saw it, the unmistakable dorsal fin slicing through the water, moving toward them with deliberate grace. The shark stopped a few meters from the boat, its massive body partially visible beneath the surface. Nina felt a strange sense of relief, as though seeing an old friend. She climbed into the water carefully, ignoring Michael's sharp intake of breath. "Nina, this is insane," he hissed. But she didn't answer. Her focus was entirely on the shark, which swam closer, its movements slow and deliberate. It stopped just a few feet away, its dark eyes locking onto hers. Nina reached out a hand, her fingers brushing against its rough skin. She felt a shiver run through her, not of fear, but of awe. The connection she had felt before was even stronger now. The shark moved slightly, almost nudging her, and then began to swim in a wide circle around her. Nina followed its movements, her strokes mirroring its rhythm. She noticed something unusual, a faint scar running along its side, as though it had survived its own battle. Michael watched from the boat, his initial fear giving way to fascination. "Nina, it's guiding you," he said, his voice laced with disbelief. She nodded, her heart pounding. "I think it wants me to follow." Donning a snorkel and mask, Nina dove deeper, staying close to the shark. It moved with purpose, leading her toward a reef teeming with life. Vibrant corals swayed in the current, and schools of fish darted around her in shimmering waves of color. The shark paused, its massive body hovering near an underwater cavern. Nina hesitated, the darkness of the cave sending a ripple of unease through her. But the shark turned to her, its movements gentle, almost reassuring. "Are you sure about this?" Michael's voice crackled through the waterproof radio in her ear. She took a deep breath. "I trust it." As she swam into the cavern, the light from the surface dimmed, replaced by a surreal glow emanating from bioluminescent organisms clinging to the walls. The shark followed closely, its presence a comforting shadow in the eerie stillness. Deeper inside, Nina's flashlight illuminated something extraordinary, a small pod of dolphins, injured but alive. Their sleek bodies bore scars and scratches, likely from an encounter with the orcas. Nina's breath caught as she realized what the shark had been trying to show her. "It's protecting them," she whispered. Michael's voice crackled in her ear again. "What? Protecting what?" "There are dolphins here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "They're hurt. The shark must have been guarding them." She turned to the shark, which swam in slow circles around the pod. It wasn't just a predator, it was a guardian, ensuring the safety of creatures weaker than itself. Getting the injured dolphins to safety was no easy task. Nina and Michael worked tirelessly, calling in a marine rescue team to assist. The shark remained close, its presence keeping other predators at bay. One particularly tense moment came when a group of barracudas approached, their sleek bodies cutting through the water like knives. Nina's heart raced as the shark positioned itself between the pod and the approaching threat. The barracudas hesitated, their predatory instincts clashing with the unspoken warning in the shark's posture. After what felt like an eternity, they swam away, leaving the pod unharmed. Over the next few days, as the rescue team worked to relocate the dolphins, Nina spent every possible moment in the water with the shark. She studied its movements, its behavior, and the unspoken communication that seemed to pass between them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Nina floated beside the shark. The water was calm, the only sound the gentle lapping of waves. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The shark remained still, its massive body a silent testament to the mysteries of the ocean. The pod of dolphins was recovering well under the care of the rescue team, and Nina felt a growing sense of accomplishment. Yet, an unsettling question lingered in her mind. Why had the shark intervened in the first place? It wasn't natural for such a powerful predator to protect creatures like humans or dolphins. Was there something more at play? Michael's research into the area revealed an answer that chilled her to the core. "There's been a surge of orca activity here," he said one morning, tapping his laptop screen. "They're hunting closer to shore, likely due to depleted fish stocks further out. That shark was probably fending them off to protect its own territory." "But why involve me?" Nina asked, her brow furrowed. Michael hesitated. "Maybe. It sees you as part of the pod now." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. She had become entwined in the ocean's complex ecosystem, a fragile balance where alliances could shift in an instant. The calm didn't last. 2 nights later, Nina woke to the sound of helicopters buzzing overhead. She ran to the beach and saw rescue boats clustered around the reef. Something was wrong. Michael joined her, his face pale. "There's an orca pod nearby, a big one." Her stomach dropped. The same orcas that had nearly killed her might return for the dolphins, or worse, the shark. Ignoring Michael's protests, Nina grabbed her gear and headed for the boat. As they sped toward the reef, the tension in the air was palpable. The rescue team confirmed her fears. The orcas were hunting aggressively, and the dolphins weren't strong enough to swim away. The shark was there, circling the reef like a sentinel, but even it couldn't face an entire pod of orcas alone. "We have to do something," Nina said, her voice shaking. Michael stared at her, incredulous. "And what exactly do you suggest? Fight the orcas?" "Distract them," she said firmly. "Give the dolphins a chance to escape." The plan was reckless, but it was their only option. Nina and Michael deployed underwater speakers, playing low-frequency sounds to draw the orcas' attention away from the reef. At first it seemed to work. The massive predators veered toward the noise, but then they turned back. Nina was still in the water, desperately signaling for the dolphins to move toward the rescue boats. The orcas closed in, their powerful bodies cutting through the water with terrifying speed. Suddenly, the shark surged forward, positioning itself between the orcas and the reef. Its presence was commanding, but the orcas didn't back down. What followed was a battle unlike anything Nina had ever seen. The shark lunged, its movements swift and precise, while the orcas worked in unison, circling and striking from multiple angles. The water churned with bubbles and flashes of grey and black. Nina's heart pounded as she watched, helpless. She could see the shark struggling. It was strong, but the odds were against it. In a moment of pure instinct, Nina did the unthinkable. She swam closer to the fray, clapping her hands and shouting underwater through her snorkel. The noise startled the orcas, briefly disrupting their coordination. "Are you insane? Get back here!" Michael yelled from the boat, but her gamble paid off. The orcas hesitated, their focus shifting from the shark to the strange, noisy human. It was just enough time for the rescue team to intervene, using loud sonar pings to drive the orcas away. The water stilled as the orcas retreated, their sleek bodies disappearing into the deep. The shark was injured, its movements slow and labored. Nina swam to its side, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered, her hand resting gently on its scarred skin. It turned slightly as if acknowledging her words, before swimming off into the open ocean. The dolphins were successfully relocated to a safer area, and the reef returned to its quiet state. But Nina couldn't shake the image of the shark, a creature that had risked everything for her and the dolphins. Months later, Nina stood on the same beach, watching the waves crash against the shore. The experience had changed her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. She had seen the raw, untamed beauty of the ocean and the fragile bonds that connected its inhabitants. Her story inspired others to see sharks in a new light, not as mindless predators, but as vital guardians of the sea. Conservation efforts in the area increased, and Nina dedicated her life to protecting marine ecosystems. Every now and then, she returned to the water, hoping to catch a glimpse of her unlikely savior. And though she never saw it again, she felt its presence in every ripple, every wave, every whisper of the sea. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the beach. Nina stood at the water's edge, her toes sinking into the cool, wet sand. The rhythmic sound of the waves soothed her restless thoughts, but her heart was heavy with a mix of emotions: gratitude, wonder, and a lingering sense of loss. Months had passed since that fateful encounter with the shark, yet the memory remained vivid, etched into her mind like the lines of a treasured map. She often replayed the moments in her head: the shark's protective circling, its fearless stand against the orcas, and the fleeting connection they had shared. It was hard to reconcile the image of the fearsome predator with the selfless guardian she had witnessed. Society had long vilified sharks, portraying them as monsters lurking in the depths, but Nina knew better now. That single shark had defied all stereotypes, acting not out of instinct or aggression, but seemingly out of a deeper unspoken understanding. Standing there, Nina couldn't help but reflect on how much the experience had changed her. She had entered the water as a scientist, a conservationist passionate about saving marine life. She had emerged as something more: a storyteller, a bridge between humans and the misunderstood creatures of the ocean. The shark had taught her that the world beneath the waves was not just a realm of predators and prey. It was a world of connections, where even the fiercest creatures could show compassion, where survival wasn't always about dominance, but about coexistence. She thought about the dolphins that had been relocated to safer waters, thriving in their new environment. She thought about the orcas, driven by their own survival instincts and the delicate balance of nature that depended on each creature playing its part. And she thought about the shark, a solitary guardian that had vanished into the depths, leaving behind a legacy of courage and resilience. Nina's encounter with the shark had resonated far beyond her small coastal town. News of the event had spread quickly, captivating people around the world. She had been invited to speak at conferences, share her story on wildlife documentaries, and even consult on marine conservation policies. Each time she recounted the events, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her words weren't just about one incredible shark, they were about shifting perspectives, fostering empathy, and inspiring action. In one particularly moving moment, a young boy had approached her after a lecture. Clutching a stuffed shark toy, he looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Do you think the shark remembers you?" he asked. Nina knelt to his level, her smile warm but tinged with sadness. "I like to think it does," she said, "but even if it doesn't, I'll always remember it, and that's what matters." The boy grinned, hugging his toy tightly. "I want to be like you when I grow up," he said. "I want to help sharks too." Though the shark was gone, Nina often felt its presence in her daily life. Every wave that lapped at the shore seemed to carry a whisper of its spirit, a reminder of the bond they had shared. She found herself scanning the horizon during her dives, hoping for a glimpse of its unmistakable silhouette. One day, as she swam through the reef, she spotted something that stopped her in her tracks. A large shadow moved gracefully in the distance, its fins cutting through the water with a familiar rhythm. Her heart leapt with hope, but as it came closer, she realized it wasn't the same shark. Still, the encounter filled her with a deep sense of peace. It was a reminder that life in the ocean went on, that every creature played its part in the endless dance of survival and connection. As the last light of day faded into the sea, Nina turned away from the water, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. She knew her work was far from over. The ocean faced countless challenges, from pollution to overfishing to climate change. But she also knew that stories like hers had the power to change minds, to ignite passion, and to inspire action. In the months following her encounter, she had helped establish a marine sanctuary near the reef, ensuring that sharks, dolphins, and countless other species could thrive without fear of human interference. She had also launched an educational program teaching children about the beauty and importance of marine life. Her goal was to nurture a generation that saw sharks not as monsters, but as vital members of the ocean's ecosystem. The shark may have disappeared into the vastness of the sea, but its impact was immeasurable. To Nina, it wasn't just a creature of the ocean. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the wildest corners of nature, there was room for compassion and connection. As she walked back to her small beachside home, the stars began to emerge, their light shimmering on the darkened waves. Nina paused, looking out at the endless expanse of water. She placed a hand over her heart, where the memory of the shark lived on. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carried away by the wind, and somewhere deep beneath the waves, a guardian swam on, its story forever etched in the tides.